More reaction now to the historic climate change deal that's been agreed in Paris this evening. With us now is Kevin Watkins, Executive Director at the Overseas Development Institute, a think tank on international development and humanitarian issues. Kevin, thank you for coming in to see us again. We sat here 2 weeks ago and it was all ahead of us. What's your view on what they've achieved in Paris in the last fortnight?
Well, I think President Obama called it right when he described it as huge. You know, none of us, I think, imagined that we were going to get a deal like this 2 to 3 weeks ago. And it's not just the text. You know, the text, I think, has raised the bar of ambition to aim for 1.5 degrees, to review the commitments every 5 years. But it's what's behind the text. There's a new momentum that wasn't there before. And I think, above all, this puts us in a position of hope. You know, there's a real chance now that we can build on this and start tackling the green transition that countries around the world need to make.
It's a very long-term plan, though, isn't it? How quickly do they need to get a move on with it?
Well, it's a long-term plan, but it's got short-term targets. So there's a commitment every 5 years to scale up the ambition. And I think what that does, it aligns the diplomatic process with the climate science. So, you know, if it turns out that the commitments aren't strong enough, countries will have to scale up the commitments. But I do think it's true, however, that the real hard yards start from tomorrow. So, you know, we need to see this deal translated into policies. That means governments in the UK, the US, China need to start cutting subsidies and taxing carbon. It means investors need to get out of coal and get out of gas, recognising that this is a commitment to reach a peak as soon as possible in order to get on the track towards 1.5 degrees. So it's up to the investment community, to governments and to campaigners around the world to make sure that we deliver.
We know that financial markets like certainty and want to have confidence in the direction of travel. So what does this deal provide in those terms, that investment is going to be, you know, the clever money is going to be in renewables?
Well, you know, any investor or investment house or pension fund that can't see the direction of travel after this commitment, I think needs an early trip to the optician. And this is sending a very clear signal: get out of coal now. The smart money is going to be moving into renewables, into wind, into solar, into hydropower. And I think the penny that's dropped here is not just that we face this huge problem, that if we don't act now, it's going to have catastrophic consequences for the world's poorest people and future generations, but actually this makes economic sense. It would be economically dumb not to take advantage of the technologies and the investment opportunities that are out there.
It even makes economic sense when you build in the $100 billion that has got to be put into the pot every single year.
Well, you know, this is $100 billion, but it's $100 billion that does two things. It prevents the type of climate catastrophe that would be facing millions of people in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. But it's also an investment that is going to generate enormously high economic returns. I think what we've started to discover is not only that a green transition makes sense from a climate perspective, but it makes sense from an economic perspective. If you want jobs, if you want inclusive growth, if you want to lift people out of poverty, renewable energy is the road to travel.
But the people who are going to enact all these measures are politicians. Politicians come and go. How much of a concern is that to you?
Well, they do, and I think that's why this agreement is so important, because the agreement will cross political cycles. It's signalling that every 5 years there will be a process and that countries will be answerable. This is a legally binding commitment, and it's signalled that from 2023 we'll have a 5-yearly review of where we are on the climate science and does it align to the commitments that are on the table. So, you know, I think the great hope of this agreement is that it gets out of this endless north-south division that have dogged previous negotiations, but it's also signalling to every politician in every country around the world that you are now part of a climate agreement that will cross the boundaries of your transition, of your exit from office into the next government.
Kevin, I'm sure we will meet to talk about this again, but for the moment, thank you very much. Kevin Watkins from the Overseas Development Institute. Thank you.
Thank you.